Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Zach Sorrells. I'm the CTO and Head of Program Development here at Skillfluence, and I'm going to be your guide today before I hand it over to our expert for the day, Rachel Clark. But before we get started on this fantastic topic around measuring what matters, evaluation as related to K and commercialization, could we do some quick introductions in the chat box? And this is around evaluation, so let's get started with a simple question. Rate your morning on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fantastic, couldn't imagine it being better, 1 being, man, that was a pretty bad morning, and then why? In the chat box, rate your morning on a scale of 1 to 10 and a little bit about why you gave it that score. In the spirit of evaluation, evaluate today's morning. See what you got. In the chat box, your name, job title, and rate your morning on a scale of 1 to 10, and a little bit about why it's been that way. Nice, excellent. 8s, we'll take an 8 all day long. 6, gray and rainy, fair enough. Yeah, I got to feel good about that. Clearing out the inbox. Barbara, good to see you. All right, we got a lot of good mornings. We have a lot of fantastic mornings. Wow, I am actually genuinely impressed by the quality of mornings. 10. Yeah, okay, Helena, fair enough. You started with a horse ride. All right, good stuff. All right, let's do this. Great to see you guys. First off, I just want to thank you for taking the time. I know everybody's super busy, so I genuinely appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to spend it with us. And our aim really, again, is to make sure that this hour is super useful, super beneficial to give you kind of a great return on investment for your hour of time. Okay. Now, the reason why we're doing, there's a little bit of scene setting as to why we're doing this webinar all around kind of evaluation, measuring what matters in K and commercialization. I think we can all appreciate that we're in an environment where we're under increasing pressure to deliver results, right? There's a lot of financial pressure to kind of demonstrate output and impact, right? And so it's kind of no longer good enough to just say, hey, we got 50 people to come to an event. We got to really demonstrate that there was real value created from that. And this is hard, right? Especially in the area of knowledge exchange and commercialization, where things oftentimes can take time, right? So how do we kind of evaluate the effectiveness of programming around when a lot of the outputs could take a while to deliver? But we need to demonstrate that in order to kind of continue to get resources to be able to do that work. So it's a challenging situation. And as we're out having conversations with our customers and clients with universities across the UK, many of them are experiencing challenges related to this, right? And that's kind of the big picture. But for me personally, I've really been excited to put this webinar on because I've gone on a little bit of a journey, had an epiphany, let's say, or a journey of discovery related to evaluation. Now, I've always kind of appreciated evaluation as being important, but I don't think I ever fully appreciated how important it was. And over the last kind of 3 or 4 years of working with my colleague and good friend Rachel, she's really opened my eyes to the power of evaluation, right? And it's not just about kind of an administrative function, right? We go, we need to do an evaluation, right? But I've started to realize that evaluation is a strategic asset and can often be a competitive advantage around some of the stuff that we're doing. And it can lead to all sorts of additional benefits, and I've seen them within Skillfluence and with the clients that we work with. You can see how good evaluation and good strategic evaluation impacts the team, because the team can see the impact of the work that they're doing, right? And they feel good about that. I can see the impact in our clients because they can clearly demonstrate the return on investment and say, listen, we spent this, we invested this, and this is what we got, right? And it makes them look good, right? I've seen firsthand how good evaluation, good strategic evaluation can help to access funding, right? So using it as part of a process to get funding to continue the work. And of course, it's been helpful in making our programs better, right? So you can get that feedback. So for me, it's kind of become very clear that, again, evaluation is not just an administrative task. Done properly, it is genuinely a strategic asset and a competitive advantage here. And so why I wanted to put this on was because I feel like kind of bumping into a lot of this around the sector, and that I want other people to kind of get a little bit of that kind of benefit that I've had that has been brought to me really by Rachel and her experience around evaluation. So it's like, I just want to share that with you, right? That little bit of goodness with you guys, and hopefully that'll help you the work you do around evaluations for knowledge exchange, commercialization, and also for everything, right? It's not just about that, okay? So I'm going to be kind of your host, but I'm going to very quickly hand it over to Dr. Rachel Clark, because she's more, she knows a lot more about this than I do, and she's got some real firsthand experience she's going to share with us. But before we do that, just to make sure, those of you who don't know of us, Skillfluence, we've been around for about 8 or 9 years now, and our mission really is to help researchers to create maximum socioeconomic value and deliver impact from the research, and also to help them deliver their career and realize their career and life goals. We've been around for a little while, worked with over 25,000 researchers, PhD students, professional services, team of expert trainers, and working with a whole bunch of universities across the UK and into Europe as well, right? So if you haven't been to one of these webinars before, just to let you know, this is part of one of our we run a webinar series, right? So kind of every 1 to 2 months, we put on another webinar. The next webinar will be in April, and it's all going to be around maximizing impact and really exploring kind of collaborative, multi-institutional approaches to delivering training and the benefits you can realize from that. So if you're interested in that, my colleague Fiona is going to drop in the chat box a place where you can register for that at the end. Just get that in your diary, but just to let you know, that's what is coming up next. Okay, shall we get started? Yes, let's get started. All right, so today's webinar is going to be broken into 2 parts, okay? Part 1 is going to be all tactical. Okay, so tactical in terms of, we're going to give you 5 principles that will make you immediately more effective with evaluation. If you apply these principles, any evaluation you will do will get instantly better. Okay, so you can come away and just start doing this straight away. And then part 2 is we're going to think about more strategic. So think about it as zooming in and zooming out. Zooming in, part 1, zooming out, part 2, strategic. 3 key takeaways that's really going to transform evaluation from an administrative function, I got to do evaluation, to a strategic asset. Right? It's going to change the way you think about evaluation and the opportunity and the value of it. Okay? Sound good? All right, let's do this. So without any further ado, let's bring in our Dr. Rachel Clark. Dr. Clark, also known as Rach around Skillfluence. Rach, maybe you can introduce yourself and get us going on this journey.
Thanks, Zach. Fantastic intro there, and a nice summary of how we started talking extensively about evaluation, whether you liked it or not, 3 or 4 years ago. So this is a fantastic opportunity for me to kind of bring my journey to you, to colleagues across Scotland and wider in the UK. I see today some friendly faces. So yeah, my background is working at the University of Strathclyde before I joined Skillfluence almost 5 years ago now. And part of what I'm going to be talking about today is actually a key project that that I was delivering at Strathclyde. And I see there's some friends in the audience there, Janine, who will probably be chortling along as I tell this story. But I bumped into the power of evaluation, learnt more through some work I did with the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement. Evaluating public engagement, very hard to do indeed. So I learned a lot from colleagues there, got a chance to work with some academics across the UK. I have to say, as an academic or a researcher myself, I am not an expert. I just want to share with you how I've learned, and I hope it makes it accessible to everybody today. So that is my introduction to today's session. Let's get going.
Okay, cool. So we're going to play a little game along this, guys. So play along with us. We need you to play along. We're going to be asking you some questions, right? It's about evaluation. So we're going to be evaluating as we go along. All right. So first question in the chat box. So the question is, which one of these are you more likely to use? In the chat box, one, if you're more likely to use the tactical or more likely to use the strategic. So in the chat box, which of these are you more likely to use? Okay. A good mix. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So over to you, Dr. Clark. What do you have to say?
So thanks, Zach. So which one of these are you more likely to use, tactical or strategic? We've got some fantastic answers there in the chat box. I'm going to ask another question. Was that a good question or a bad question for us to ask right now? So one in the chat box if it was a good question, two in the chat box if you think it was a bad question. Oh, lots of twos. Lots of twos, and I would absolutely agree. Anybody tell me why they think it's a bad question there? See how the knowledge of tactical evaluation is unclear. Yeah, both might work. Ambiguous. Yeah, don't have enough information. I love it, Chris Buckingham. Got it. You got it in one there. So for me, the key principle is, what are you asking when? So I asked you, or Zach asked you, which of those two options would be most useful to you. But in fact, asking that question at this point in the webinar, when we haven't shared anything about either, is a pretty terrible time to ask that question. It's a hypothetical question at this point. So the key principle here is timing is everything. You can't ask participants to predict their future behavior. They will probably tell you anything you want to know. And you also can't ask people what happened before an intervention. So for me, really the key principle is timing is everything. So yeah, which one of these are you more likely to use? That's the current question. How might we be able to fix that question? What would be a better question for me to ask at the same time if I was wanting to understand something about how you were feeling about starting this webinar? What kind of questions might there be? Yeah, do you already have a strategy? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so I'm trying to feel a little bit about what's happening in the room. Yeah, how confident do you feel about any of those, either topic? That would be a good one. Yeah, do you have strategic or more tactical requirements in your role? Or even as we've got on the slide there, which feels more interesting to you? Do you know something about either? So yeah, what have you already done to measure impact? Yeah, exactly. So you're trying to think of a question, and the purpose of it is to really understand what you can ask right at that point. So just to move on a little bit better, what might be better at the end of the program. If I'm looking at how to measure whether this session has been useful, we might want to get really specific. So what specific skills and knowledge from today's session will you apply and how? What challenges might you face? And interestingly, what support might you want to help embed that learning today? And particularly from a really short session like this today, I'm going to give you some really kind of high level insights. It's perhaps not going to be enough for you to go deep. So you might be able to say, you know, it was really interesting, it was useful, it gave me some real insight. But what I need more is, and as a training designer or a webinar designer in this case, I can then follow up and know what you need at the next step. So yeah, timing is everything. That's the first principle. Think about when you're asking that question.
Okay, so I got another question for you guys. We got timing is everything. So in the chat box, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are Rachel and I doing as trainers so far? In the chat box, 1 to 10, how are Rachel and I doing as trainers? 10's fantastic, 1 horrible. In the chat box. Oh, they are so kind.
Oh,
they are so kind.
Lovely.
We need to do more of these webinars with people this nice. Yeah, Natasha, ask me later, right? We'll see. All right, cool. Okay, Rachel, over to you.
Okay, so same question back to the audience. So was that a good question, 1 in the chat box, or a bad question? 2 in the chat box, please. Lots of 2s. Fantastic. Yeah. So why do you think that was a good or a bad question? So Janine, yeah, too early to ask. So we're building on that timing question. Have you had enough of a chance to appreciate the quality of the trainers that are standing before you today? So why else? So building on the timing, not specific, no criteria. Yeah, okay. Okay. Anybody else got any ideas? Awkward to ask face to face. Interesting. Yet not enough. Let me tell you another thing that hasn't come up yet. Never ask 2 questions in one. So in that, we asked if Zach and I were good trainers, 1 to 10. So you might think Zach is absolutely fantastic and you want to give him a 10. But in fact, I'm pretty difficult to understand, or I haven't said much, and you might want to give me a 3. So how do you easily answer that question? So key principle, never ask 2 in 1, and you would not believe how many times I see this, and it's probably one of my biggest cringe moments.
I will attest to that. I have in many occasions written a 2-for-1 question that I have been torn to shreds over. So yeah, it's easy to do. It's easy to do because you want to add it in there, right? You go, but I want to know both things. I want to know both things. So it's an easy trap to fall into.
Have today's skills and tools been useful to you?
Always skills and tools.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Okay, so yeah, that's the question. So again, how might we improve this? So how might we improve it? Yeah, exactly, Victoria. Ask 2 questions rather than 1. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10's poor and where 1's poor and 10's great, rate Zach. Yeah, so exactly. If you have an interest in asking that question, if you're going to do something with that information, then split up, or look at us as a team. So as a team, the dynamic between the 2 of us, you could ask that, and that is back to asking 1 question with 1 answer. fantastic. And for a bonus question, to really make this information more useful, I really like combining a numerical question with a qualification. So at the front, Zach had asked scale of 1 to 10 on your morning and why, and the why really brings that to life. It also normalizes a little bit about how people choose which number to choose, because you might just generally score low, somebody else might score high, but with the why, you can tend to get a little bit more of an insight into why people are choosing to rate that person like that. So that's the second big key principle. Never ask 2 in 1 questions.
Okay, back over to me. We've got another question for you in the chat box. Okay, so how did it make you feel when you were asked to give me and Rachel a rating in the chat box? Put one word in the chat box that captures how being asked that question made you feel. Amused. I love that one. A lot of uncomfortables and awkwards. I'm actually feeling quite good that we made people feel so uncomfortable today. It's part of, I get a little bit of pleasure out of that. Okay, over to you, Rachel.
I'm just reloading my chat. So yeah, it's just coming up. Uncomfortable, awkward, confused, awkward. Yeah, lovely. So was that a good question or a bad question?
We've got a mix of good and bads in there.
Oh, have we? My chat seems to be malfunctioning,
Yeah, we've got
so you might have
a
to
nice
give me
mix,
a little
of so
commentary.
controversial a little bit of whether that was a good question or a bad question. So
Okay, so it was definitely, in my mind, a bad question to ask, and there's a number of reasons why that might be, and I think you've probably touched on those in the chat box. So the key principle here is the collection method really matters, and this one again, there's a number of different reasons why. The first part of that is you were asked to give an opinion live about Zach and I and how we were functioning, and you were also asked to give your opinion on how it made you feel. Now that in the chat box is linked to you, it's linked to your name. We have a record of that, and you're in a room with your peers, so your opinion is absolutely visible and recorded in this session. So no doubt it would make you uncomfortable. The other thing is, did you temper what you chose to write or score based on the collection method that we were offering you there? So was there any part of you like, oh, I'd better score them a bit higher, or it gives you a little bit of a moment of pause, I think is the way to describe that.
oh, I definitely like to guilt people into giving me higher scores. This is a thing I do. Because I'm watching. Like I'm watching you giving my score, right? So how do we make it better?
So yeah, absolutely. Any ideas how we would make that better? Seeing if I can reload my chat.
So we've got ask afterwards in an anonymous survey, anonymized poll. Yeah, anonymous poll. I think they got the gist of that.
Excellent. So yeah, absolutely. Anything where you are having to give a personal opinion or have any kind of recording, you would probably want to give that in a more closed environment or through an anonymous collection method. So if you felt that you really wanted to ask somebody about a score about a person or feelings or thinking, then again, just think about the method that you use to collect data, and that can, we could have put a poll up that wouldn't have captured your name in this setup. So just the fact that we chose to use the chat box was to highlight that that awkwardness, to quote Natasha there. So collection method really matters when you think about the question you're asking and how people will feel about giving that information in that surrounding.
Okay, you guys are getting the hang of this. We've got another question for you. So we just want to check in to see how we're doing so far. Make sure you guys are getting value from this. So in the chat box, how many pages of notes have you taken during today's webinar so far? 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, whatever number. How many pages of notes have you taken during today's webinar so far? 1/6. Yeah, that's like, what is that? 2 lines. I like that. Good. Good. Got no, yeah, right. Notes. 0.1, Joe. I don't even know what that is. That is like 1 word. Cool, cool. All right. Over to you, Rachel.
Great. So again, 1 or 2 in the chat box. Was that a good question or a bad question? And tell us what you think about asking you how many notes you've taken.
These are some tough questions we're asking, Rachel.
Okay, so it was definitely a bad question, because the idea that we had, or that we're theming through this, is how useful we're trying to gauge how useful you're finding today's session. And so by asking this terrible question about how many pages of notes you've taken is a huge assumption that taking notes means that you found something useful, means that you might refer back to it another day and apply some of the principles. So you can see how far you can get back from a degree of usefulness by asking that question. And that doesn't take into account the size of your notebooks and various things like that. So the key principle here is use the right metrics to assess what you're trying to do here. And so the number of pages doesn't reflect how much people have understood anything, taking meaning from the session. You could write a huge amount without grasping the key concept. So it's absolutely irrelevant to the outcomes. It's a passive activity, and it doesn't measure any kind of skills gained or knowledge applied or outcomes you could achieve. And again, in a chat.
Go ahead, sorry, Rachel, sorry.
I was just going to say, it can be easily manipulated again in the chat box. You could say, 20, lots of interesting information there.
I just love Janine's comment that she's been too busy answering questions to take notes. All right, so how do we make it better? In the chat box, how will we make this question better? Let's just give them the answer, Rachel.
So again, if we're trying to assess how to see if you found today's session useful, so a couple of takeaways from the session, or what might you implement when you go back to your day job. So just really trying to take it back to what it is you're taking from the session. And so when we are looking at that, when we're assessing it to see if it was effective, we know what's been a real eureka moment for you. And those kinds of opportunities are what starts to change behavior.
Yeah, cool.
So using the right metrics is always a good place to start.
All right, guys, last question, last principle, and then we're going to zoom out into strategic. All right, in the chat box, how has the audio quality been in today's session? 10, perfect. 1, horrible, in the chat box. How has the audio quality been? All right. Rachel.
So Final question. Was that a good question or a bad question to ask?
I think they're getting the hang of this.
That's good.
This would be the
Yeah.
one that we should have changed. That should have been, no, it's a good question.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've said it was a bad question, and the reason that question was a bad question was today we were trying to assess the usefulness of this content for you. At no point are we going to act on the quality of the audio. You would ask this question if you were perhaps testing a new mic setup or a new venue. But today, I can assure you, we are not going to assess how the quality of the audio has been. So for us to use your time, our time to assess, we need to be really clear why we're asking a question. And if you don't have a reason for that, to use that information, just don't ask the question. Make it one question shorter, and everybody will thank you for that.
Are you telling me no one's going to get upset by not having an additional question? Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Correct.
definitely. Restraint. Okay, so
Absolutely.
how might we make it better? Well, I think they've got the point. I think they nailed it. I think they nailed it, right?
Yeah.
When in doubt, don't ask them.
Yeah, when in doubt, don't ask. So yeah, better for us would be not to have asked you that question at all. Yeah, don't ask something unless you're going to absolutely use it. I love going through evaluation forms here and and weeding out all of those questions to say, what are you going to do with that information? How are you going to use that to answer? Is it going to give you what you're looking for? And really the final part of this for me is this is a really nice kind of segue into the next section, because you really need to know how you're going to use the information you're asking for, and that is really why you need to be clear on what you're doing. So yeah, that was just a little bit of fun to go through some key principles. If you've ever had to make an evaluation form, if you've ever answered one and thought, oh, I can't answer that question, or it's asking you to think about something too abstract, then thinking about these key principles, that timing when you're asking the question is irrelevant. Don't mix up two questions and only give one opportunity to answer. Think about the collection method. Think how abstract or quasi your metrics are that you're trying to use, and really be clear on the why and only ask what you need to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think, these are simple principles, right? And you go, well, this is obvious stuff, right? But it's not, right? And it's obvious. It is obvious, but it's hard to apply with discipline consistently, right? It's easy to drift into these kind of traps. So I think if the key idea here is if you follow these principles and stick to these rules, your evaluations is almost certainly going to be immediately better, right? Just stop doing some of these things and start doing it this way, and it'll automatically tighten up that evaluation. Okay, simple, right? But hard to do with discipline consistently. All right. Cool. So time to move on to the second part. This is the part I've been really looking forward to, because this, I think, is potentially transformative or transformational for people. So really looking at this, how to think about evaluation strategically and moving it from an administrative task to a strategic value add asset. Okay, so the setup on this, guys, is that Rachel's, as we were kind of preparing for this and putting this together, and Rachel's sharing her stories and experience, and there's just one specific story that she was sharing that I was like, that I think you need to share with people, because that journey is powerful and impactful, and how it changed the way you, Rachel, thought about evaluation. I thought it was really, really an insightful story that I think others could benefit from hearing. So I'm going to pass it over to you and just to share that experience with folks.
Thanks, Zach, and please jump in if I miss any of those kind of the key learnings, because I see things from my perspective. So yeah, so happy to have a chat about it. But I guess just setting the scene of the situation. And again, Janine will probably be out there kind of cringing while I talk about this. But I bumped into evaluation pretty literally, or my lack of appreciation of it, when I was running Engage with Strathclyde, which is a week of events that happen every year in the beginning of May. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as the story unfolds. But the work and the effort and the detail I had to go to pull this off every year with a fantastic team. I was focused on what people wanted. They wanted to know how many people were walking through the door, how many events there were, real, relatively easy quantifiable information. And we were probably 2 or 3 years into this process, and I bumped into the associate deputy principal who I reported to one day, and I was still on the high of Engage that year. And just to put into context, and if you want to show the next pictures, this was an award-winning program. This was a Times Higher Education Leadership and Management awarded program. So there was a lot of good energy in the university about it. And Tim, who's on that picture there, bumped into me and he said, "Oh, but the numbers weren't as high this year, Rachel. I thought we would, be on a trajectory of growth here." And I was like, "What?" I had a great feeling about the events. I was in amongst them, but the data that I gave him at this dashboard just didn't show that picture. He was seeing, thousands of people coming through the door, but it wasn't kind of a linear growth year on year. And it was probably just a bit of a passing comment from him, but it deflated me a little bit, because I knew the work that went into it, but I also knew where that effort was taking some of the academics. And I thought, I'm not capturing this very well. If that's the takeaway he has and that's the data I'm presenting, then I maybe need to look about how I'm going about this and really capturing that feeling a little bit better. So to put that in a little bit of context, the week of events was designed to initiate new and escalate existing relationships between individual academics or research groups and external organisations. And the real driver was to look at ways to boost the number of academics and projects that were delivering the knowledge exchange KPIs for the university. And I mean, I'm talking, this probably happened about 10 years ago. So at the time, it was a significant investment that was made to really pump prime or raise awareness through those events. And the idea being the events would happen, they would stimulate lots of collaborative conversations, lots of applications would happen. Ultimately, over a number of years, perhaps the knowledge exchange KPIs would increase. So as I said, my head was down for 9 months of the year, call for proposals, helping with marketing and recruitment, logistics, events, then a little bit of evaluation reporting, and we could breathe again over the summer. So I'd kind of taken my eye off the ball there, that what Tim was really interested in were these long-term outcomes. So I wanted to go back to telling the story, the story of why all of this effort was happening. I was imagining that, of course, the number of conversations would go up. That would result in better downstream activity, so more applications, and it would eventually lead to KE outcomes. The other thing I wanted to try and show, and again, it was a feeling I had, that the time to achieve those outcomes would be lower, so more knowledge exchange more quickly. And I think the looking back now, this is the theory of change. And as I went to study a little bit more about evaluation, this is exactly how you should go about strategic evaluation. So you're hypothesizing about the change that you want to make, and then designing activities to see if that's what happens. So, you know, I wanted to show that Engage was having an effect more than what would have happened organically. And being a chemist and a researcher, if you could just go back one a little bit there, sorry. I wanted to visualize something like this, which was, you know, over time, there would be an interaction between an academic and an external organization. There would probably be an existing relationship, a few emails, a few meetings, and you might get an application and a successful KTP. And what I wanted to see with Engage was actually through that investment that the university made year on year, you would get a much steeper kind of starting point to that graph. So you can put the Engage back on there. So I was just trying to think of a way to visualize this for everybody today, that because of that intervention and the infrastructure that we had in place to help academics, it would surely speed things up. So we provided a lot of that infrastructure to bring that collaborative conversation much faster and much more robust at an earlier stage. And what I really wanted to show was that second line. And I think, you know, just drawing that, there's a value difference there between those two lines. And I was this is the kind of thing I was trying to think about how I could demonstrate. You know, again, going back to my kind of chemist roots, I'm thinking, you know, I want to plot things, I want to get numbers, and you know, I really want to show that value. And so I started learning a little bit more, and I thought, right, at each point, I need to collect data, I need to you know, be able to prove all of this, you know, return on investment for what me and the team are doing. And I just started to look into that, and I thought, you know, I don't own the data for KTPs. You know, I could go to Stuart at the time or Alison and say, you know, can you put a box on your KTP application form to say, did this academic come to engage with Strathclyde? You know, that would be a great number to count. You know, has that had any effect? But when you start thinking about all of the knowledge exchange outcomes that are possible, you just think, you know, this is almost impossible. You know, this mustn't be the route to be able to capture the real value that we're adding. So again, I just had to take a step back and think, what am I trying to do here? You know, and I knew in my heart that something good was happening. And again, it just happened from a chance encounter at the time. I bumped into an academic that had held one of the smaller events. And, you know, this goes back to Tim's point about the numbers not increasing year on year. This particular year, we'd probably had a couple less big events. So we used to have events for kind of 300 teachers, you know, so that would be one event, 300. It would be a huge difference. And this particular year, we had a lot of really small events, maybe tens, which I actually found more effective to kind of to push that line further to the left, because the academic could really get into a good conversation with this external company, let's say. And so bumping into this academic, I realized that the individual journeys that they went on was actually the real color to this. And I was trying to flatten out all of this data and quantify it to turn it into a line, when in fact what I was realizing was that that line were individuals. They were human stories that really could bring to life the effort that the university and the team were going to make that happen for people. And it just triggered because every year we would get people applying year on year because they thought it was a fantastic opportunity. And that's when they downloaded to us everything that had happened since their last event. So in a really resource efficient way, I could build in the data collection at the next time point. I didn't have to make a survey and go out to them, 6 months after their event. How did you rate? Was it useful? That information came to me naturally through that natural mechanism, and I realized I could measure tens of journeys to demonstrate and bring those numbers to life. And by trying to collect, number after number, I was just depersonalizing this experience that people had had.
Yeah. Can I add something in there, Rachel? I think
yeah,
just to kind of something that when you were kind of explaining this to me, there was an aha moment for me, a couple aha moments really for me. One was if we go back to that, I'll even just scan back to it, is this slide and this visual. And I never really thought about it this way, which is you've got the way things are currently done and the current journey and the current pathway, if you will. And then the new way, the proposed new way, or the new way it's being done. And to see that presented like that and the gap between those two is literally the value of that activity, right? So we go, what is the value of the thing that you're doing? And if you can define the way it is currently being done or has been done, right? And you can define the new way and what that difference is, you could potentially be able to quantify that. Yes, there's work in figuring out how to quantify, but that is the value. When you go, what is the program worth? It's the distance between what it would be without it and what it is. And I was like, I've never quite thought about it that way, right? And if you start to say, well, if the goal is KTP and here's the end story that you're wanting to get, and here's a traditional journey, now I have the ability to not just measure the effectiveness of that, but to design a more effective approach, right? That's where the value's at. That's really, it just kind of helped me think about, just sparks ideas. As much as measuring how effective something is, says, how do we make it more effective? And I think the other thing really, just building on that, put a finer point on this, is like, it was literally, it's almost impossible, right, to measure the journey for the whole program. And you guys will feel that in the situation you're doing. And what I think the real specific takeaway here is, when that's impossible to do or very difficult to do or resource intensive, a good kind of step back from that is go find the individual journeys, right? Because they will give you examples of, right? So we've got a program that 100 people go on, and it may not be feasible to get 100 to map out those 100, but if you can get 10, we can extrapolate from that. And we can tell stories around that. This is just a sampling of, right? So we can use that to demonstrate about how it is working. Right? So it's not, again, I just think some of that stuff, when you were explaining to me, was like, I never really thought about it that way. It just started to spark some ideas for me. But back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's a mixture. And again, knowing about the theory of change, which is basically designing your hypothetical story to test against, to using your logic model to plot the activities and check back. It just brought me out of that detail. The detail I was asked for, they wanted to know how many people crossed the threshold, but it was my responsibility as well to say, okay, I can give you that information, but in the context of this meaning. And, again, the university invested this money to drive knowledge exchange outcomes. So I have some responsibility, if I want that to be a successful annual program, to actually take some of the initiative about how the work that we were doing, me and the team, could drive that. And And so as part of that story, it brought everything into context. It also made me think, okay, I have a span of control in this particular area at that very first part of the funnel. What can we do to further enhance the success of that part of the pipeline, that part of the journey that the academics and industry are going on? So what can I optimize within my activities to make that line even steeper? And there were some things we did. We offered a pre-event briefing about the available funding that people could talk about in their events. The KTP Centre came to that. Tanya and Janine's team from the Impact Accelerator account, basically touting the next funding opportunity that the academics could use. And they went to events as well. They went to help and facilitate. So we felt we could move that line a little bit to make it a little bit steeper. We couldn't necessarily help further down. That was somebody else. But by being able to storytell for change, which is my next takeaway, I could enthusiastically talk to the people further downstream to say, okay, I'm widening the funnel here. More people are going to come in. They are going to want your help. Can we talk about how we can optimize that? So I could widen the funnel much further down through engaging storytelling. And really my third takeaway there is measure what matters. If there are pieces of information people want to know, measure them. Again, going back to that focus, just really be clear what is going to demonstrate that the change, the investment that you're making is taking you to that end point. Yeah, so I guess just to bring the whole session to a close, just our key advice and recommendations is really to start with the end in mind. What is the story of your hypothesis, the theory of change that you're going to make with your investment? So what is that story that you're going to tell and test against through delivering the activities that you're going to evaluate? Measure what matters. So really think about the resource involved. We can put a really elaborate evaluation package in place, but are you going to have the resource to create the data collection, to actually analyze it and to report against it? It needs to be relevant, and there needs to be some key decisions about how you measure exactly the minimum you need to move that story forward. And think about what this information is telling you in real time. So how can you optimize your activities to increase the efficiency and effectiveness? So don't just set out on a journey and keep going and keep going. Use that information that you're collecting to check back and think how you can optimize for that. So in the Engage example, we brought in that extra pre-session briefing to get people to be more ready to have those conversations and speed things up. Yeah, going back to the first section, critically think about every question and collection method that you use. Get somebody else to think about it, talk to them about it. Does this work? And is the collection method you're using appropriate? I could do a whole session on different collection methods. Absolutely fascinating, whether it's in real life on webinars.
That sounds fascinating.
I bet.
We'll do that one next, yeah? Next year.
And then finally, just only ask what you're going to use. And again, that kind of underpins everything. If you don't know what you're going to use and why, then you're not going to design a very good evaluation process.
Great, super useful, super interesting. And to build on Rachel's point there, right? Evaluation as a topic is massive, right? And we had to make some choices about what we could cover in an hour, and we wanted to just give you some very kind of tactical things that could maybe you could use straight away, and also just to start thinking about how we might be able to use evaluation strategically. Now, we're going to ask a final question, and this is a real question. I'm tempted to ask the one about how we've been as trainers, but we'll stay away from that. But in the chat box, which one of these are you more likely to use moving forward? Which was more useful for you today? The tactical kind of stuff and the strategic? I want to ask a double barrel question is what I want. I want to ask which one was more interesting and useful? I want to ask both of them, right? So, but which one of those do you think will be most use to you in the chat box? Yeah, I think yeah, both are cool. Both are cool. Potentially, I mean, for me, really thinking about two can be transformational. It really can be. You know, it takes you to interesting places. I think done well, it can help you bring in more money, you know, bring in more grants, get funding for programs, demonstrate success. It really, I mean, that would be my key takeaway from this is don't treat evaluation as just a throwaway thing you do. It's so much more valuable, important, and powerful. Okay, so that would be my final takeaway from that. Okay, guys, before we say goodbye to you, just to let you know again, next webinar, we'll be looking at collaborative multi-institutional training programs and how those can deliver impact. Register for that early if you're interested. I think you'll get an email from us as well, and there should be a link in the chat box. But I just would like to say, from me, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for playing along. We appreciate that. You guys made a lot of fun. I had fun. Hope you guys had fun. Rachel, final words from you before we say goodbye.
Yeah, all I would ask is put evaluation at the heart of what you do, and yeah, have fun.
Cool. On that note, thank you guys. Have fun. Take care. We'll see you at next one.